Hey guys, and welcome back to a new video. So today is a little bit different, but I wanted to show you how I made one of my favorite skirts at the moment, which is the bias cut skirt. I've made a couple of midi skirts, so today I decided to make a shorter version. So to make the pattern, I started off with one straight line, and from this I came out 90 degrees. I marked a quarter of my waist measurement. I went 10 inches down to the hip and I brought that out 90 degrees and I marked a quarter of my hip measurement. So I joined the hip and the waist points together. And the next measurement you'll need is how long you want the skirt to be. Originally I was planning on making a midi skirt, but I didn't have enough fabric or enough paper clearly. So I do kind of shorten it in a moment. So here I'm just adding on 2 inches as seam allowance, which again I worked out was way too much, so I should have just added on 2.5 centimeters. And I mark here on the fold line, so this is the line we started with and this will go on the fold of your fabric. So here I am shortening it to about, more mini length, and I added just a 1 inch hem as well. So it took me a little bit of time to figure out how to lay my fabric. I only had 1 meter of fabric and it was a narrow width. It was only a 45 inch width, whereas the standard would be 60 inch. So my fabric the pattern doesn't quite fit the fabric. But you can't really see because the corner's cut off, but yeah, it doesn't fit perfectly. So I went ahead and I cut both pieces separately. So I folded the fabric diagonally from a corner point. I placed the first pattern down the fold line along the fold of the fabric, and I just traced around it because it was easier than pinning it, because this fabric does have a tendency to slip a lot, especially when folded on the bias. So I just cut that out and then I repeated it for the same, repeated that for the back as well. I would recommend, if you're going to make a mini version of the skirt, to when you're cutting out the back piece, to slightly curve the end of it and add a little bit more length in the back. I didn't do this, and it just, obviously when it covers your bum, it just sits up a little bit higher, so a little bit, maybe an inch extra of length would have been ideal to have in the back. If you're making a midi version or any longer version, that's not really necessary. So now to sew up the skirt, I'm just taking the two pieces of fabric and I'm putting them wrong sides together, so the right side of the fabric facing out. And this is because we're going to do a French seam. If you have an overlocker or something, you can just do a normal straight seam and overlock the edges, but I just wanted to finish the edges off this way. So I just carefully pinned the two sides together with as many pins as possible, just because, again, when it's cut on the bias, it's quite stretchy, and as you're sewing, the two layers can move, so I wanted to make sure that they stayed perfectly together. Sew up the two side seams with a normal straight stitch. Maybe aim for a 0.7 of a centimeter stitch as well, so not the full centimeter. And we're going to trim this back after anyway, so we don't need to be too big. The key here is to iron out your seams as well when you've sewn the first seam, as this will make it so much easier to sew the second seam as well when there's enough of a crease. So iron out the seam flat and then trim off the excess. So turn the skirt the other way around, and we're going to sew 2 more straight seams, and we'll end up encasing the first seam that we already made. If sewing a French seam is new to you, I would recommend pinning it as well before you sew it, but I like to take the risk and just avoid the pins and see what happens. And just repeat on the other side again. So once the two side seams are finished, we're going to attach the waistband. So for this, we're going to make an elasticated waistband. So wrap a piece of elastic around your waist to measure, and let it overlap by about 1 inch or so. Make sure the waistband isn't too tight but isn't too loose either, because we do want to have a little bit of a stretch in it so that it sits snugly on your body. So the first thing I did was attach the two ends just with a straight stitch, and then I just opened that out and stitched both sides down as well, just to make sure it's really secure. So then next I found 4 even points in the waistband. So I marked each of these like so, and then the next thing you want to do the same on the skirt so that you have 4 even points, anchor points basically, for attaching the waistband. So to find the center points of the skirt, just put the 2 side seams together and put a pin in either fold on either side. Join up the pins. So we want to sew this on the outside of the skirt, and we're just going to sew with a straight stitch all the way around. Just make sure that you pull on the elastic as you sew it, and pull the elastic as tight as possible to lie flat with the skirt. So you might see in the next bit where I'm sewing it that I'm pulling the elastic quite a bit, and this is because I had way too much fabric, because I added the 2 inches instead of just 2.5 centimeters. So you shouldn't have to pull the elastic that much, because when I finished with this one, it was almost like a gathered skirt rather than just a slight elasticated waistband. So you won't have to pull on it quite as much as this, but yeah, do make sure the elastic is flush to the skirt. And then when we have the elastic sewn on, you just want to fold it back the opposite direction and top stitch it. So to finish the skirt, I just did a rolled hem. So I just folded up by maybe half a centimeter and then half a centimeter again. And I'm just going to stitch this the whole way around with a straight stitch. And I would recommend, for sewing a bias skirt, definitely use as many pins as possible, and try not to pull the fabric too much as you're sewing it, as this can make it stretch a little bit and go a bit bumpy. So here I'm just taking some excess fabric off the skirt. I've tried it on, it didn't fit. So I actually took about 3 inches off either side. So I just pinned this in place. I sewed another straight seam on the side, trimmed it back, and sewed a French seam again. As you can see, I had to remove the elastic to do this, so I highly recommend trying on the skirt before you attach the elastic and just see if it fits how you kind of want it to fit. So just a little close up here as well of how I top stitch back the elastic after I'd sewn it on. And then just to keep it secure, you want to fold the elastic inwards and just stitch in the ditch right in the side seam. Just it's kind of like a bar tack, just over and back a few times, so that the elastic will stay folded inside the skirt when you're wearing it. And there you go. After a lot of trial and error, we finally have a nice skirt. So if I didn't have to redo the elastic and the side seams, this would have taken me probably about an hour, including the pattern. So it's a really nice quick project, and one that doesn't take a lot of fabric either. The longer your skirt will be, the more fabric you'll need, as obviously lying this on the bias does take up a lot of extra fabric. But I did have some scrap fabric left over, so I'm planning another little tutorial with that. I don't want any fabric to go to waste. I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial. If you liked it and you like these kind of DIY videos, do give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe, as I'll be making more of them, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.